Hello and welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. We're really excited to have you. As a quick introduction, as our host for the webinar today, for those who do not know me, my name is Sam Fairmont. I'm the Category Development Officer here at Spotify for Tech and Telco across EMEA. And prior to life at Spotify, I spent over 10 years at Vodafone across a number of different roles, spanning commercial, marketing, customer success, strategy, and digital transformation. And here at Spotify, I aim to be the internal voice and evangelist for these industries to ensure Spotify caters for the specific needs so we can be the best partner for you and help you to deliver on your goals. We have an exciting lineup of speakers and content relevant to the telco sector today. This will be a fun and insightful session with lots of different perspectives for you to digest. I'd love to receive your feedback and questions on any of the content covered today or anything you'd like to hear about in future. So please email me directly anytime, and my contact information will be on a later slide. As you'll see on point number 4, we have some fun to end the session today, along with some awards and prizes, which harness the power of our collective Spotify insights. Please scan the QR code on the screen and log in as you usually would to your Spotify account. And we'll come back to this towards the end of the session. In case you missed the QR code, don't worry, we'll show it again later in the session. And now I'd like to kick off today's content, and to begin, I'll hand over to Imad Ahmed at WARC Advisory, who is going to share the key highlights from the recent telco-focused Getting Your Brand Heard paper. Welcome, Imad, and thank you very much for joining today.
Cheers, Sam, and hey everyone, thanks very much for joining us. As Sam mentioned, my name's Imad Ahmed, and I'm from the WARC Advisory team. So for those of you who don't know WARC and what we do, we've been around for almost 4 decades, collecting research, best practice case studies, and data around how marketing can be at its most effective. And we help brands, agencies and media companies therefore use some of that evidence to make more informed decisions around their marketing strategy and their budgets. And our partnership with Spotify actually began back in 2020, and that's where our story begins. So back then we ran a piece of research around B2B marketing in the tech and telco sectors. But fast forward a couple of years, and what we wanted to do is we wanted to hone that research in more into the telco space, firstly, but also around the EU5 countries, so UK, France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. And the question that we were looking to really dig into as part of that research was how, amongst those brands, is digital audio being used within those media mixes? Now, as I mentioned, we had a wealth of research on WARC gathered over quite a long time to help us start to unpick some of the complexities around that question. But what we also wanted to do is we wanted to get a pulse of the industry. So we went and surveyed over 360 telco marketers to just find out how their roles were developing. What were the key goals they had? What were the challenges that they had? What were the opportunities that they were seeing around their media spend and their media mixes? And how might digital audio play a role within that? And as well as the quantitative layer, we were also really thankful to these 10 wonderful human beings who gave up their time and their clever thinking to contribute to our study. These were some amazing interviews that we ran to help us add insights very much from the coalface of what was happening in the telco industry. And in fact, we're delighted to be joined by Samrat Saran towards the end of this section to just go through some of the neuroscience perspectives on how you can get your brand heard. But before we do that, let's give a quick overview to some of our key findings from the research. And the first conclusion that we were seeing was that increasingly telcos are wanting to become more like techcos. And what you can see on the slide there is some data from YouGov. It looks at the popularity of telco brands, and next to that, we're looking at the popularity of consumer electronics brands. So here we're taking that as a proxy for technology companies. Now, when you look at those two tables side by side, and when we look firstly at fame, they're broadly comparable. But when we look at the popularity of telco brands versus consumer electronics brands, we see that telcos start to lag behind. And so not only in terms of consumer sentiment, but also in terms of financial returns, telcos are starting to feel the pinch behind some of the techcos. And that's something that they need to address. Now, in terms of how they're looking to do that, that really involves a case of reinventing and repositioning their role within a digital society. And there's a great appetite, obviously, to do that, using things like 5G, using things like how telcos can tap into the experience with their brands or within consumer routines and so on. So there's a real appetite to reposition more like a techco. What we also saw, though, was that obviously a huge amount of change was happening. So 90% of European telcos told us that they'd evolved their comm strategy over the last 5 years. And when we asked our survey panel how they thought their advertising approach was changing, a couple of interesting points came out on top. So firstly, the top answer was that there was an increased number of media channels. So this kind of plays to the idea of growing media fragmentation, how telco brands can respond to that. Secondly, we were seeing a shift amongst the telco industry towards shorter term performance marketing, often at the cost of longer term brand building efforts. Now, when we look at the category as a whole, now obviously that might have a quite challenging, quite detrimental effect potentially to the telco category overall, as it becomes less front of mind than some of the other categories out there. And telcos is already relatively low interest when looking at the other categories that consumers are having to think about in their day-to-day lives. But actually, at an individual brand level, that throws up quite a nice set of opportunities to try and win some of that excess share of voice by investing appropriately within brand building. Now, leading on to the media mix point, we also saw that was called out as one of the key challenges that telco marketers were facing, alongside the range of product options that they were able to offer. Now, thirdly, interestingly from the study, we saw that there was a digital audio gap that was coming to the fore. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of spend was skewing towards short-term performance. But what we saw, partly off the back of the pandemic, but more broadly, that consumer behavior and behaviors around different media consumption, whether that's through music streaming or podcasts, was actually creating quite a nice and rapid growth in terms of the share of media consumption that digital audio was able to enjoy. And that's what we can see on the top row of that data there. So we're looking at a range of between 17 to 19% share of consumption for digital audio. But that's not matched by what we're seeing in terms of share of spend. Across those 5 countries, share of spend is below 1% in each of those countries. So again, a real opportunity for telco brands to tap into and capitalize on this growing consumption in digital audio. And finally, when we think about those opportunities, we saw them working throughout the marketing funnel. Now, this was really interesting. I suppose, firstly, when we talked about, how exactly telco marketers were measuring their effectiveness, we saw, perhaps unsurprisingly, that customer acquisitions came out on top. But interestingly, things like customer upgrades, brand lift metrics also played quite heavily within the minds of telco marketers. And what we saw then was asking just those marketers at the European telcos who we were studying, for those who were investing in digital audio, actually they called out music streaming and podcasts as more effective than some of the other media channels that they were using. And that's what you can see in some of that data on the slide. But what's really interesting here, and again, this was called out by our survey panel, was that there were huge cross-channel synergies that digital audio could very much tap into. So ways in which digital audio could amplify the overall effectiveness of an advertising campaign or an advertising initiative. And this really stands to reason when you think of digital audio, not only as providing audio solutions, but potentially also display and clickable video solutions. Just being able to engage with different senses gives it a huge advantage in that respect. But it also gives it an advantage when we think about how exactly digital audio can amplify and affect the impact of a campaign across the entire marketing funnel. And again, our survey called out how things like engagement, brand lift, proximity to the customer, response at the very lowest level of the funnel, how all of those things were positively impacted by digital audio. And so a quick recap then of those 4 findings. We went through them very quickly. So if you want to find out more, do go to the research white paper that we pulled together. But we looked at how telcos were wanting to reposition and reinvent themselves within digital society as more like a techco. We looked at how change was happening at scale in response to things like media fragmentation and challenged to some degree by the shift towards shorter term performance marketing. We saw how there was a digital audio investment gap that was coming into play. So there we were seeing that actually digital audio as a share of total media consumption enjoyed around 17 to 19% share, but that wasn't matched by investment, which was below 1% when we looked at the share of spend. And finally, broadening out that idea of opportunity, we were seeing opportunities not only in terms of cross-channel synergies within the entire media mix that digital audio could very much help, but also we were seeing how it could help brands work through the entire marketing funnel and the different advantages there. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we interviewed quite a few clever brains in the industry to get their thoughts on the telco category, to get their thoughts as well on how digital audio is playing a role within that. And one of the people who we were lucky enough to be able to interview was Samrat Saran, who's going to be joining us now on this call, just to give his perspective on some of the neuroscience behind digital audio within the telco industry. So hi, Samrat, good to see you.
Hey, Ahmad, pleasure to be here.
Great stuff. So we'll jump straight into the questions then, and towards the end of my summary, we saw how digital audio could play within the entire marketing funnel. So from a neuroscience perspective, thinking about the telco industry, how do you see digital audio playing that role across the entire funnel?
Well, I think it's important to first understand the role of audio in the evolution of human history. And we as human beings have evolved as prey, not as predators. So for us, our audio faculties were designed to help alert us, to create attention, to make us aware of our surroundings, and then absorb information. So audio is one of the most critical senses we have. In fact, it's one of the few senses that we can't turn off even when we sleep. So neurologically aside, the second part is when you think about what COVID has done to our society and the transition and acceleration we've had from entertainment being a binge watching experience to entertainment being an on-the-go, on-demand experience, audio, especially digital audio, has seen the highest amounts of penetration and growth because it is one of the few things that doesn't take that much bandwidth, is an accompaniment throughout the course of the day. And whether it's music or podcasts, you can listen to it as an enhancer to your experience. And thirdly, when we think about the marketing funnel itself, we've sort of said reach is what drives awareness, customization is what drives desire. But the marketing landscape is not what it was 5, 10, 15 years ago, where there were specific vehicles that only drove reach and specific vehicles that only drive customization. You are sitting in a world where with CTV, you can customize and personalize. with addressable markets and algorithms that are coming there, you can create personalization there. But what we've also seen is digital audio and social media reaching levels of penetration that have never been seen before. So in it, you now have a media format that has penetration, has the ability to customize, is on the go and on demand, and actually uses one of the senses that we have evolved as a species to listen and pay attention to at every step of our waking and sleeping moments. So my question to you, Imad, is where do you think it should fit within the marketing funnel? Should it be left and relegated to only one aspect of it? Or is it something that can live across? I think the
And I
answer is
suppose,
it can live across.
yeah, there's so much potential there, right? And
Yeah.
it's interesting you talk there about attention. That leads nicely onto the next question, because attention has been something that's been so prominent, I suppose, in the effectiveness space and the marketing industry over the last few years. So thinking from a neuroscience perspective and how the brain behaves, what kinds of considerations do you think telco marketers need to be thinking about when they're planning for attention? And again, what's the role of digital audio within that?
I would say do not plan for attention, plan for intention. And there's a difference. Just grabbing someone's attention that, hey, I exist is not enough. But creating a strategy that will actually move and ladder your message through the funnel and get somebody to be convinced that, yes, you are the best solution for them and for their lives is important. Traditionally, we've thought that when you see something, it grabs attention, but that's not true. Your subconscious is responsible for 90% of your decision making. There are things that you are capturing with your peripheral vision and through audio, sense, temperature that changes the context of meaning completely. So when you are actually planning media, you have to think of three things. One, how does my entire media ecosystem work together? Not as individual pillars that exist on their own, but together. How do they amplify messages together? How do they create reach together? Which then basically gets to your next question of what is the role of digital audio? And digital audio plays two parts. It can be, one, a primer that only starts off the conversation in people's minds, and then the rest of the channels can actually take that forward with full form storytelling. Or two, it can be used as the last bit of once the story has been told as a reminder to what you or where you are available. And I can tell you that from all the neurological testing we have done for Spotify and otherwise, digital audio, whether they're listening to it passively or whether they are intently listening to it, the experience of creative or content to creative is not as disruptive as we see in other channels. And what that allows is a very smooth transition of engagement, and that allows messages to break through and be delivered very, very convincing.
Excellent.
So it's a great driver of intention. And when you focus on intention, you will prioritize digital audio.
Perfect. Great stuff. So just final question. We could talk for a lot for a lot longer, but final question, Samrat. So at the very start of my overview, I talked about this idea of telcos wanting to become techcos, and part of that was their struggle with brand distinctiveness and therefore the need to reposition, reinvent themselves. From a neuroscience angle, what do you think lies behind that? And again, where does digital audio play within that?
We as humans make decisions based on the memories that we have collected over our existence. And memories are a very unique jewel in our entire system because we don't have infinite real estate in our minds to just make memories of everything. When we do create long-term memories, they are made with the intent for future consideration. But what influences a memory to be made within the brain is based on several factors. Do I like what I'm listening to or what I'm watching? Is this something that's personally relevant to me? Is this something that has an emotional impact on me? Is there a narrative that is bigger? Purpose comes in this place, storytelling comes here, prior memory associations come here. Is there a narrative that is bigger than just what you're basically telling me is like there's a $12.99 offer for the next 3 months? Is it visually enticing? And is it desirable? And it is the collection of all these 7 different functions that basically then drive towards memorability. So as a brand, I always joke that I could probably write brand horoscopes every day. My customers don't understand me. They only see me as the product I offer and the price. I wish they could see me deeper. And this applies to every industry, not just telco. So while we were comparing telcos to techcos, you talk to techcos, they have the exact same issues that the telcos are saying they do. It is about creating brand distinctiveness and thinking about what sort of sonic signatures are you going to innovate on, what sort of brand experiences and brand stories you're going to create. How are you going to create value beyond just the product itself? And I know that sounds simple, or it sounds like a very simple thing that everyone says, but value is through the stories you tell, because the human mind is interested in stories. It is not interested in offers. The offers are just part of what gets wrapped within the story. So think about the broader story that you want to tell. Use every media format to its full advantage. And remember that digital audio and the passive listening experience has huge potential, both in terms of delivering an audio-owned signature that you can provide, to creating imagery and visions that you will never be able to visualize, but are definitely possible in the human mind.
Great stuff. And that's a great bit of advice to finish off this section with. So thank you again, Samrat, for taking part, for joining us. I'm going to hand back now to Sam to run on with the next section of the webinar.
Thanks, Imad. Thanks, Samrat. That was really insightful. So thank you very much for joining and sharing. So I'm going to spend the next part of the session exploring how telcos can win on Spotify, covering some of the insights from the WARC research, but along with our own perspectives. So firstly, 3 insights really jumped out to us from the research. The first being a demand for education on the benefits of advertising on digital audio and Spotify in particular, with telcos noting, as was raised earlier, a key challenge faced is optimizing the right media mix to use. So we have this session today to level set following the research, but we also plan to do more local sessions as well, so watch for this space. The second being, despite ongoing economic challenges, which we are all facing, there is a positive outlook for media spend, and specifically digital audio and podcasts were 2 areas which ranked highly in terms of channels where investment will increase, behind only social media and online video. And finally, the research reinforced that those telcos who are already leaned into digital audio and podcasts commonly rank these channels as more effective versus other media. Despite economic challenges, the outlook for telcos is bright. With 5G and fiber rollouts, amongst other services, a key part of digitalization across Europe, connecting consumers on the move and at home, schools and businesses alike, enabling some truly amazing use cases. These opportunities also can present marketers with a challenge. With more personalization and diversification, surfacing the right product or offer to the right audience at the right time becomes even more critical. And as we know, there is now an expectation from consumers for this. And this was clearly evidenced in the research findings, as Imad shared earlier. So how can Spotify help? Well, we've broken it down into 3 key themes. The first building block focuses on our unique mix of reach, user consumption, and engagement. This section is a little bit more in depth, transitioning from our macro data and the key relevance for telcos. Firstly, users are now spending more time on their mobile devices than on their TVs, and digital audio is continuing to rise year over year, now towards an hour and a half a day in 2022, which is a lot of time per day tuned in as an opportunity to connect with them. Now, these charts reflect UK data, but we also see the same trajectory across other markets in the EU5. And GWI forecast that in the UK, Italy, and France, music streaming share of consumption has overtaken broadcast radio. And it's not quite there in Germany yet, but it is forecasted to do so in 2024. Now, we know you're looking to reach an engaged audience at scale, given telco services are active in nearly all households across Europe. And the great thing on Spotify is that people are in a very personal setting, and we can deliver that audience at scale, outranking other platforms. And within our reach, our true sweet spot is in the key Gen Z and millennial demographics, who are becoming a higher percentage of consumers. And we see this trend common across the EU5 markets. Spotify is our users' companion throughout their day. They remain 100% logged in across devices, and we are with them in the car, on a Peloton, while they're cooking, and so much more. Spotify is always on. Today, those users listening on multiple devices stay connected for over 2.5 hours per day. This gives us a really unique insight into the rhythm of our users' day across different activities of passive and active engagement. And this is particularly relevant for telcos, as there's a really nice synergy with the presence of your services across connectivity, hardware, and content services across the range of these devices. And as mentioned earlier by Imad, Spotify also adds incremental reach when combined with other media forms. So the numbers on the slide here, the percentages, reflect the ranges for the UK, Germany, Spain, Italy, and France, with top radio, TV, and social platforms. For example, the incremental reach in the UK with radio is 26%. So simply put, if the total available audience was 100 people, if you added Spotify to the radio, you would reach 26 more people. And this is where Spotify can help to amplify your message in synergy with the broader mix. And looking further into our data shows something really interesting. In the EU5, switchers are far more likely to be high volume users on Spotify across both music and podcasts. And we have further insights from this research down to a country level, which we can happily share with you and talk you through. And then beyond reach and consumption alone, our Sonic Science research delivers some fascinating insights. And the standout point for me is that not all ads are created equally, as Samrat alluded to earlier. Users' control of content on Spotify drives an active and hyper-personalized experience, which leads to higher engagement, and this converts to a 93% transference over to ads. Simply put, ads on Spotify are more memorable and users are more likely to notice the brand. And overall in this study, Spotify outperformed all other media in engagement. Now, trust, brand safety, and relevance, these are all key in highly penetrated sectors like telco. Our research shows that across Europe, users trust Spotify. Our platform knows them well, and this has a halo effect for brands who advertise with us. Now, the second theme I'll touch on focuses on how our ad solutions can complement your objectives. Leaning into our audience, Spotify can shape our ad solutions to drive impact across your marketing priorities. From brand storytelling, sharing new propositions to attentive and targeted audiences, to driving quality traffic through actionable ads. We can create solution mixes to drive the impact that you want. And we can share more directly with you on what solutions are best matched to drive these outcomes. And the power of storytelling on Spotify is that we can reach audiences across both leaned in moments as well as screenless moments, capturing the attention of those otherwise hard to reach audiences. And link back to the earlier slide on incremental reach, combining Spotify with other media can amplify reach and impact. And finally, in the white bubble in the middle, combining audio and video then has an additional multiplier effect. So think of Spotify as your marketing multiplier. And finally, Spotify's first-party data can help telcos target key consumer profiles with precision, relevant to each campaign objective. For example, combining location targeting with 5G and fiber rollouts or specific user profiles linked to product launches. And this is becoming even more critical in a cookieless world that we're moving into. So circling back to WARC's research, telcos who are already leaned into digital audio rank it really highly against other media on most key measures. We asked what the key benefits of advertising with Spotify are, and the top 3 shown on screen here strongly align to the themes that we have covered here today. So closing out with 3 key takeaways. The growth in digital audio consumption provides telco with scaled audiences. Our combination of reach, consumption, and engagement across devices makes Spotify truly unique. And telcos can leverage Spotify's multi-format solutions and targeting to add a multiplier to your marketing mix and amplify your message. And now to hear about this in practice, I'm going to hand over to Alma Safari, one of our client partners here at Spotify, and Johnny Winn, who's joining us from Virgin Media O2. Over to you, Alma.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, guys. As Sam mentioned, I'm the client partner on the telco vertical here at Spotify, and we've got with us today Johnny Winn, who's head of advertising at Virgin Media O2. He's one of our close partners and, of course, one of my clients on the telco vertical. Johnny, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us for this Q&A.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Just to kickstart the Q&A here, tell us, what's your top brand ambitions for O2?
So we've had a crazy year and a half because we've just merged with Virgin Media. So we're now technically Virgin Media O2. So I suppose the first thing to point out is that our brand ambitions have risen commensurately with our increased size in the market. What I'd also say is that we're still a challenger brand. So, and O2 is always a challenger behind EE. And we're now a challenger brand in 3 main verticals: so cable TV, broadband, and telco. And I originally came from the O2 side. And what's kind of fun about that is that we're actually massive. So we have 49 million customers, but we're still a challenger across all the spaces that we're in. So as part of that, I'd say that ultimately within that context, O2 still needs to be. I'm still pushing for it to be as famous as possible, and it was great to see that first slide that Imad showed. Great to see that we were #1 there. That's ultimately what I aim for, because we see a huge amount of trickle down effect when we have the biggest share of voice, when people are sort of thinking of us, when we're front of mind. So ultimately, that's always my #1 ambition. And within that, there are of course nuances. Carving out our space within the telco category is critical as a brand. We're not necessarily always the fastest, we're not the cheapest. So it's how we carve out and make it, carve out a niche and make it so that customers come to us for a true purpose.
Thank you. And how would you say your media strategy is evolving to keep up with consumer trends?
Well, the #1 consumer trend that we're seeing, of course, that everyone else is seeing, is that consumers are spending less because of the cost of living crisis. And that in turn affects our bottom line. So our media has to work smarter. We've got fewer people in market, so everyone is buying for those fewer numbers of customers. And it has to work harder in that, every penny counts, and effectively everything that we do is a choice, an opportunity cost. So if we spend on this, we can't spend on that. And we were fortunate in a way in that the pandemic was kind of a dry run for what we're going through now. and we're having to copy some of the strategies and tactics that we used back then, and we're applying them again, probably on a bigger scale, because the cost of living really is affecting an even bigger portion of the population. At a macro level, I would say, things like linear TV, gone are the days where we would just chuck loads of money into that and see our brand metrics rise. We're definitely looking at a more integrated strategy across video generally. And I would say that applies to other channels too. I think with regards to audio, for us, it's kind of always been a cost-efficient and effective channel for us. I think we've probably underused it, but we certainly would look to lean into that even more so, given that it's got, it kind of does the trick for us in terms of getting that incremental reach, in terms of awareness. So yeah, I'd say those are probably the key moves we're making.
Brilliant, thank you. And sort of going back on the topics that were sort of touched upon during this webinar, earlier in this webinar, what role do you feel that Spotify plays in your media strategy? And I guess more importantly, where have you seen the impact driven from Spotify this year?
I would describe Spotify for us as a proven, reliable partner. So we have Spotify on almost every campaign that we run. And I think generally, Spotify gets used a lot in terms of its strong performance. So for us, it's kind of a proven performance channel. I've always been a proponent of Spotify as more of a, actually, it's even stronger as a sort of branded impact channel for us, because, performance channels are a dime a dozen. And frankly, I think, some of the stuff that Imad was saying earlier, I think there is a tendency with performance channels that you get kind of stuck in the nitty gritty of the details. And actually, the irony that I think is that it actually encourages short-termism. I think where we've seen the biggest leap forwards from a brand perspective using Spotify has always been when we've done sort of bespoke activations using your very malleable platform, actually. The other thing I'd say is probably that in terms of the audience profiling, you guys, I think, are a standout partner of ours in that term. I think the audiences that we get with you are excellent, and so that's always something that we can just count on. The last thing I'd say is that when I tell this to media owners all the time, which is that ultimately we've got decisions to make in terms of where we spend our budget, and in the grand mix of things, Spotify is it's one kind of channel of ours that we use, but it does add to every campaign that we put it on. So it's always I don't think we've ever gone, oh, I wish we hadn't spent on Spotify. It's always been actually of use to us, either through performance or through something interesting from a brand perspective that we've done, and that's evidenced by our results and kind of brand uplift studies and so on.
Brilliant, thanks. Good, that's really good to hear. And I guess lastly, what's top of mind as we go into 2023, and how can we at Spotify continue to support O2 and I guess VMO2 to deliver against your strategic goals?
Yeah, so I mean, top of mind again is the cost of living crisis, both at a consumer category, brand level, and how we navigate that. That's kind of my main worry for next year. And I think again, one of the sort of ironies is that we need to be mindful that most of the country is going to be struggling and is struggling. And therefore, obviously, they're spending less on handsets. They're not looking to upgrade. And yet, ironically, we need to lean into those customers who still can. So it's how do you balance that sort of dichotomy between, I suppose, the haves and have-nots. We're ironically more reliant on those higher value segments this year and next year than we ever have been. And again, similar to where we found ourselves in the pandemic, where some people were furloughed, some people actually just sat at home not spending and therefore had more disposable income to spend on the new handset. Again, it's like we need to find that right balance. And I guess where I see Spotify helping out, to the point that Sam was just saying, it's that engagement, that high engagement. People love Spotify. People use it all the time, and also just being able to match like for like the audiences that we seek. We can find them easily using Spotify's data. So I'd certainly see it as helping us reach those higher value segments for next year. But also, if we need to, we can go mass and speak to everyone. And we're doing a bit of strategically. We're aiming, obviously we're a nationwide brand, so we're speaking to everyone. We've got different products and propositions for literally everyone. But yeah, we at the end of the day we're a business, so we do need to reach those lower hanging fruit audiences, and there are fewer and fewer of them. And so the more precise we can be, the better.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. And with that, I'm going to hand over back to Sam. Thanks, Johnny.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much, Johnny and Alma, for that section. It was truly, really interesting, very insightful. So thank you very much. And now we'll move into the section of interacting with everyone on the call. So the QR code is on screen. So if people can join, and then we'll start to see what our collective insights of our Spotify usage looks like. And I'm really interested to see if we'll have any new top artists, maybe outside the likes of Drake, Bad Bunny, Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran. So I'm interested to see if we get a surprise. And as I mentioned earlier, we will there's some awards and some prizes as well that we'll share. I learned this myself previously as well. It always takes a few minutes to log in. I think let's start. Let's see what the insights are telling us. Oh, it's close to the top two. Doja Cat, I love Arctic Monkeys, so that it's nice to see them coming back. Actually, I love all those artists, but interesting. No Ed Sheeran. An interesting. Top tracks. Oh, I don't know. It's in memory, so that'd be one I need to add to my playlist. But all good tracks. Interesting. Top genres, pop always comes out on top. Popular EDM, that's good to see. I like a bit of EDM myself. Sorry. Rock and rap and other is always quite a big portion, as we have so many genres on Spotify. So let's get into the awards. So who's our power user? Highest number of playlists. Johnny Winn. That looks like we planted it, but we did not at all. So nice one, Johnny. And who's our ray of sunshine with the happiest tracks in their top 50? Julian Bretz. And our honorary Spotify, the person with the most Spotify playlists. Johnny Winn again. And our happy hour hero, early evening streams, maybe while cooking dinner or having that drink after work. Abby Ridgewell. Good listening. I'm keen to see what you listen to. And our road tripper with the most driving related playlists. Miranda Roberts. I'd probably, if my data was in there, I think I'd probably be quite close on that, but it's not. Cool. And I think that brings us to the end of the awards. So we'll reach out to those winners separately and share some prizes. So to wrap us up, I'll close with two final messages. Firstly, just a thank you to all of our speakers today and everyone who's taken the time to join this webinar. There will be a survey that pops up on screen. We really appreciate your feedback. And then, as I mentioned, we're tailoring our approach specifically for telcos to address your marketing goals. So if there are topics or any feedback, comments that you'd like to know more about, then please do reach out to me. And I'm really interested to pick those up directly. And then as a forward-looking statement, here at Spotify, we're continuing to invest in our ad solutions to better serve brands. So most recently, we launched pod sites, to help advertisers better measure and scale their podcast advertising across Europe. And additionally, we recently launched our Spotify Audience Network in Germany to provide meaningful listener reach and scale to podcast campaigns. And also, I'm really excited. There's some new research coming in early 2023, which I think will be particularly helpful for Spotify, for telcos, and help you to sort of transition and activate on Spotify. So we look forward to sharing more with you as we continue to innovate, launch new tools and resources to make it easier for brands to activate on Spotify. So once again, thank you very much for your time and look forward to speaking to you all in future.